Proportional Response, Book 1. Chapter 10, Part 5, Winsome. Enable sat at the desk in his quarters and felt a sense of impending doom. Henry had just told him that war was inevitable, now meaning that several possible branches of the plan had been closed by recent events, not all of which they fully understood. That's not what bothers me most, though. Trouble is, I am not sure what it is that is causing me such distress. Henry continued, talking about why he'd wanted to abort their plan to minimize the sanctions over the incident with the mining equipment. Working on extending the time frame before we go to an all-out shooting war is another reason I wanted to abort. The more we all seem divided, the more it looks like their tactics to try to separate humanity from the rest of you are working, the more patient they are going to be about starting the war. Remember, they have had 2 serious losses of naval ships, where we only had 1, and it takes them longer to build ships, and one of their losses was a shipyard. So, they still see advantage in drawing things out for a little while. The last reason I wanted to abort is that I was afraid we would overplay our hand. It is absolutely vital that the Exaltans continue to believe that our governments are not in this together, so to speak. I think we are fine this time, but that particular tactic of having you come in to mediate and save the humans by looking like the reasonable voice is one we are going to have to use sparingly, and I would have rather saved it for a more serious issue. That said, you played your role masterfully and gave us some breathing room, thank you for that. Your part about the trust fund was totally inspired. Where did you come up with it? Enable shrugged. I have seen that tactic before. The amounts for the therapy are vastly overblown, then provided at bargain basement rates, or just played off altogether. Then the money somehow manages to disappear into one pocket or other. What I suggested is actually a common tactic within the Empire. Henry nodded. I am going to have to recommend it to our legal scholars as well, but that is another story. Enable smiled. Happy to be of service. There is something in all of this I need explained, however. Why did you send force down there after equipment before we could even try a diplomatic solution? For that matter, how did you send military forces so quickly? I'll answer your second question first, which is to say that we didn't. The men and women with weapons were mostly just the workers who were supposed to be reporting to the mine. Some of them had never held a rifle before. Henry gave a conspiratorial smile and put his fingers to his lips. Most of those weapons weren't even loaded. The few real combat people there were the security forces that humanity had agreed to provide. The Kothro knew this, so did Kilintar. Keeping that fact hidden is one of the reasons he sealed all the documents. So, the how is that the company which entered into the agreement is one which believes in contingency planning and had a lot of spare weapons to be used, and they used them in a very effective bluff. Well, sort of a bluff. The mercs they had hired for security would have been more than capable of dealing with the situation of it had come to violence. They had a few prototype suits of the powered armor we will be issuing to our military and selling to some select mercenaries in the next few months. They didn't deploy them, but had men suited up just in case. As for why, we knew that we were going to lose in the council. Even Kilintar wouldn't have made this sort of move unless he had it all sewn up in advance. We would also have lost militarily. There just happened, by pure coincidence I am sure, to be a Sultan full battle fleet on patrol just a couple of days away. The only reason we managed to get the material out is that we were able to bluff our way through. That fleet had already set course for the mining facility. Enable gave a low whistle. That was a risky bluff, Henry, but I'm glad it worked. I imagine that the Zoltan planned to start working the mine with the Kothro in order to supply their ships when the war started. Henry nodded. That is our estimation as well. We expect that they will still do so, but Zoltan mining equipment is not as well suited to that environment as ours, which is one of the reasons we think they wanted ours so bad. Damage control is going to be tricky on this one, Enable. Thankfully, all we have to do is tell the truth. We have shown the video of the incident to the Ruxa and the Baitha, both before the meeting this morning, so we avoided Kilintar's mandates. They have copies of those recordings, and will be showing them around, quietly, or just mentioning that they know Kilintar's version of events was misleading. It isn't much, but should at least reduce the damage this has caused. Enable nodded, and he felt the cloud of doom hovering over him lessen a little. Humans doing as humans do, and making lemonade from the lemons they had been handed. I still don't get that one. Lemons aren't half bad. Good. Now, what are we going to do to deal with the damage and turn this around? I mean, your people were relying on those metals, I know, and you've lost an awful lot of face in this. What do we do? Henry's face lost its good humor. Nothing. There is nothing else we can do. They outmaneuvered us on this one, and we took it square on the nose. I know that you like to collect little phrases from various cultures, so here is one of ours you may not have heard. Win some, lose some. A corollary phrase is, you can't win them all, and we lost one today, even more deeply than it appears on the surface. And there it is. That fear and anxiety he'd been feeling came crashing down upon him. He'd begun to feel the humans in general, and Henry in particular, were invincible, which gave him some comfort. This despite seeing that the human body count in military engagements was seldom zero, and other evidence. He'd let himself believe, wanted to believe, for a long time, and now the rug came out from under him. Henry's overall attitude and his little quotes managed to buck him up, however. Even when they lose, they don't stop. Don't even slow down. I think the only way to stop the humans would be to kill them all. A shiver ran down his spine. I think the Zoltans know this, Henry continued. You and I, along with our delegations, set our strategy up assuming that the Altan Senate would remain so embroiled in their own internal bickering that they wouldn't come to notice what was going on here for a while yet, and we'd be fighting Gilantar's lazy fury. Her Majesty wanted to put some covert ops in place to make sure that it stayed that way, but let us have the point when we argued against it. Looks like she was right, and I owe her a steak dinner. Now we have a more subtle and more dangerous opponent, and probably the entirety of their voting class paying attention to boot. Things are going to get harder from here on out, Enable, and I don't want to say what I'm about to, mostly out of friendship, but I must. Too much is at stake. Also, out of friendship, I feel I have to say something. I saw the distress you were in yesterday when I got angry. I admire the fact that you could maintain your calm and you handled yourself well today, but the stress of all this is starting to show on you, and I am concerned for my friend. Please, if you need to step away from this, I ask you as the human ambassador to send someone who can see all of this through. As your friend, I will offer my help in any way I can provide it to get you through, but I also, as your friend, would rather see you sit out for a while and get your bearings than do damage to yourself trying to. Inable let a smile grow on his face as he waved away Henry's concern. He truly felt touched. Friendships were rare in the business of politics, though from what he understood, Viventa didn't have it as bad in that respect as the humans. Therefore, to be able to count not just a political human, but this particular human among his friends, it warmed his hearts. I thank you for your concern, my friend, and I am truly touched. Look, my hands are all flushed. That said, you needn't worry. I had a discussion with Her Majesty about this very matter last night, and she is sending her older brother here to help me shoulder the load. As I believe you humans would put it, I have not met the man, but he is something of a legend in his own time among my people. Professionally, I assure you that Grand Duke Kazla Felderin will be here to make up for any lack I may have, and will be able to seamlessly step in should I become unable to continue. Personally, I would like to assure you that I know my limits and will not allow myself to be pushed past them. Well, not any further past them. Henry humphed at him and gave him a sympathetic smile. You tried to sneak off in the night and she caught you, didn't she? His hands flushed all over again, and he hid them below the desk, but Henry nodded. I'm sorry, Nibble. Indelicate question. I'm also sorry it came to that. I should have talked to you sooner, man to man, about it. Goodness knows, I would have, if you were human, but I still don't know the social niceties of your culture well enough to bring it up without the risk of causing offense. Enable let the shock register on his face. Part of me wishes you had, part of me is glad you didn't. Let us make a pact, here and now, you and I. No question is too indelicate, no subject is taboo. If we are in private, any and all subjects are fair game. We both know that we value the other man highly and regard each other as friends. Let us treat one another with confidence and forbearing. Henry nodded gravely, then brought his hand up. A quizzical expression crossed his face, then he smiled, then grew somber again and brought his other hand up and placed one hand behind the other so that he had the illusion of an extra finger. Enable's breath caught in his throat as Henry gave the hand signal for a pact of brotherhood. He considered asking Henry if he knew all that this meant, but he looked his friend in the eye, and he knew. He gave a solemn nod and raised his hand in the same gesture. "You honor me, Henry, with this bond, and I thank you. There are few even among my own kind I would trust like this, but I will admit that you have earned this trust a long time ago. Thank you." "No, Enable, thank you. You are an admirable man, despite your streak of utter and complete cowardice. You can say it, my friend, me brother. My kind does celebrate courage almost as much as yours does, but we also look upon an abundance of it as insanity even more than you do. And we have less stigma attached to a lack of it. No. I made peace with my nature as a young man, and have tried to stay in positions which would play to my strengths. Yet, here I ended up with you as my bond brother." Irritation and a tiny spark of anger crossed Henry's features, then he threw his head back and roared with laughter. They laughed together for a few moments, allowing the tension to fade. When Henry spoke again, he had the same old light in his eye. "So, Duke Fearadhach, you say? I didn't expect her to send him for 6 months at least. Still, if she realized you needed backup, I am not surprised she sent him early. Wily old coot probably realized that the ground has shifted underneath us too, and would have sent him even if you hadn't asked." This time it was Enable's turn to feel offended for a moment. Then he laughed ruefully. No Ventor would refer to the Empress in such informal tones among any but his closest confidants, and only a human would use such a backhanded compliment as a term of endearment. Yes. I think she may have sent him sooner, rather than later, regardless. Either way, I am anxious to meet him. I am too, truth be told. Word of his exploits have reached human space, and he is something of a popular figure over here. I wonder if you and I can get him to do some television interviews for us. Maybe even a diplomatic tour of human space. Oh, never mind. We'll put that off for later, after we've both had the chance to get a read on the man. So, tell me, has Her Royal Highness..." Some of the old tone he used to object to was present in the words, but he could also hear the jest. "Told him yet that he's going to be the next Prime Minister?" Enable nearly choked on his own tongue, and had to cough to clear his throat. Henry chuckled, then looked apologetic. "I'm sorry, friend brother. I guess I shouldn't do that to you. No, we don't have your office bugged, and your government hasn't gone past you to tell me anything. He is just the most logical choice. I think you'll see why when you meet him." "You've met him then?" "Only briefly, some years ago, before I was ambassador. We didn't exchange words, but I listened to a lecture he gave about military strategy at a conference. He's a dynamic guy, very charismatic. Our intel folks have kept track of him, and I get reports, on occasion. He is enough to pique the interest of the vaunted Human Intelligence Network. I am even more intrigued. Oh, don't be. We have files that are pages long on anyone we think could be a help or a hindrance, and, before you ask, we had him pegged as help even before I met him." They continued to talk into the wee hours of the morning, newly minted brothers defining their relationship. As they signed off the call, Enable gave the appropriate hand signal for brothers, minus knot of blood. Henry tried to match it, but lacked the 6th finger. After a moment of mirth, he gave his best approximation and they signed off. Enable sat back in his chair, tired but content. He'd come to regard Henry as a brother over the years. To have that made real gave him some peace. He just sat and let his mind wander, when something else occurred to him. A broad, conspiratorial smile grew on his face as he followed the thought. Aunt Eldia is reaching an age where she is probably considering leaving her more adventuresome days behind, and she has made some noises about ambassadorial work. I do have the room on my staff, and I don't think anyone would begrudge me bringing her on to help around here. I wonder how Henry would feel about a cross-species marriage. It is rare in the League, but I know it happens occasionally, and having my bond brother married into the family would be satisfying.